All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a pretty stark warning from a former senior advisor at the Pentagon. He believes that NATO and Russia are being pushed right to the very brink of a direct conflict. We're going to break down his argument for why the West might just be sleepwalking into a war it's not at all prepared for. Okay, so let's get right into it. This all kicks off with a series of military moves that, according to our source, are a lot more dangerous than they might look at first glance. We're talking about major drills and deployments happening quite literally right on Russia's doorstep. So, who is making this claim? It's Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Now, this isn't just anybody. He's a decorated combat veteran and was a senior advisor in the Pentagon, so this is someone with a real inside the Beltway perspective. And his argument is that these recent military actions aren't just random. They're part of a pattern that he finds deeply, deeply concerning. So let's start with what Macgregor calls the pattern of provocation. He says that to really get what's happening, you have to stop looking at these recent NATO military actions as just, routine exercises. From his perspective, they form a deliberate escalating pattern, and it's all designed to provoke Russia. Now, if you look at these one by one, you might just think, okay, standard military posturing, right? But Macgregor's whole point is that you have to look at them together. You've got anti-sub drills right near their key naval bases. You've got stealth bomber flights. And then you have a U.S. general openly talking about seizing Russian territory. For Macgregor, that's no coincidence. He sees it as a coordinated effort. So you have to ask, what's the logic here? What's the thinking behind these moves? Well, according to Macgregor, this isn't some kind of accidental escalation. He argues it all comes down to a specific strategic mindset in Washington, what he flat out calls a bullying mentality. And this quote right here, it really gets to the heart of his argument. Macgregor is claiming that the driving belief in the West is that if you just make a massive show of force, if you use these bullying tactics, you can intimidate Moscow and force them to completely back down in Ukraine. And this is where you can really see the dangerous disconnect that Macgregor is pointing to. While the intended effect might be intimidation, he believes the actual effect is just plain provocation. So instead of scaring Russia into making concessions, he says these actions are just creating a super tense, volatile situation where one wrong move, one little miscalculation from either side could ignite a much, much bigger war. Okay, so that's one part of it. The next piece of the puzzle, in Macgregor's view, is something he calls an infatuation with air power. He argues there's this really deep-seated, and he would say dangerous, belief inside the U.S. establishment, that air power gives you a way to wage war without any real risk. He uses this really powerful, kind of shocking metaphor to describe it: sex without consequences. It perfectly captures the appeal of air power, especially to politicians, right? It promises this clean, decisive way to use force from a nice, safe distance. So what does he mean by that? Well, it's this belief that you can attack your enemy with total impunity, using bombers and missiles without ever having to put your own troops on the ground and without facing any real retaliation. He warns that while that might have seemed to work against smaller countries, it's a dangerously flawed idea when you're dealing with a major power like Russia, which absolutely has the ability to strike back. And to really drive home how dangerous he thinks this kind of miscalculation is, Macgregor pulls out this chilling historical parallel. He's basically arguing that the West mindset right now mirrors the catastrophic mistakes made by leaders right before World War I kicked off in 1914. Think about it. Back in the summer of 1914, the British cabinet declared war on Germany. And they were living in this total fantasy. They genuinely believed the war would be short, it would be glorious, and it would all be decided in a single big battle out at sea. But then the reality check came. In walks their new military leader, Lord Kitchener, and he delivers this bombshell. He tells the shocked cabinet that this war will last for years, and it will consume millions of lives. A far grimmer and, as it turned out, much more accurate picture. And here's the kicker. One of those cabinet members later admitted that if they had known the true cost, they never would have gone to war in the first place. Macgregor's point is that the West is making a similar, potentially catastrophic miscalculation today, totally underestimating the real consequences of a direct war with Russia. And all of this bullying mentality, this fantasy about air power, this historical blindness, it all leads to the absolute core of Macgregor's warning. He claims that while the West is busy provoking Russia, it's ignoring a huge, dangerous mismatch between its own lack of preparedness and Russia's readiness for a major war. So McGregor paints this really stark picture. On one side, he sees the West as unwilling to admit its strategy in Ukraine has failed, so it keeps up these provocative acts, all while being fundamentally unprepared for a big war. And on the other side, he sees Russia as being fully prepared for that kind of conflict, with its patience wearing very, very thin. And if you want a number to put on that lack of preparedness, this one is staggering. He cites NATO's own internal assessments, which he says conclude that the alliance can currently defend less than 5% of its own territory with its existing air and missile defense systems against a full-scale attack. Just 5%. So his final takeaway is this: that long-held belief that the West is somehow immune, that a war can be fought over there without any consequences back here, that's over. In his view, Russia's patience is at its breaking point, and a direct war wouldn't be contained to Ukraine. It would absolutely reach into Western Europe and the United States itself. He ultimately leaves us with this final, really sobering question, reframing everything we're seeing not as some distant crisis being managed by experts, but as a potential prelude to a much wider, more devastating conflict that the West may be tragically and completely unprepared to face.